When you've had a long week and want to mix it up with something new and interesting to eat, try Blue Apron's 2 or 4 serving menu plans with those hard-to-find ingredients sure to spice up your weekend. With 60-plus options each week, you can choose from an ever-changing mix of high-quality meat, fish, vegetarian, WW recommended, and wellness offerings. Order now and get $110 off across your first 5 orders when you visit blueapron.com/unique.
Welcome to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur. I'm Matt, and as always, I'm joined by Jamie. Jamie, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well.
All right, so the question everybody wants to know, right, what are we at, 3 weeks in a row? We've had
three, and it has only been 3.
Or has it been 4?
You know, when you have a run like we've had, it feels so euphoric that I forget that more time hasn't passed, but I guess maybe it is just 3.
You lose track. So let's say we had Zombievers, but we had the Prince before Zombievers.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. No, because you know what killed our streak? What started us off on a bad way was Abe Lincoln versus the Zombies.
Right.
so we kind of bounced back with the Prince, and then Zombievers, of course, which may have been a ringer, And then last week's The High Lane certainly wasn't a ringer. We neither of us knew what we were going to expect there, but so we're 3 in a row. So the question, Jamie, did we make it to 4? An unprecedented, actually I'd say 3 is unprecedented, or 2 is unprecedented on this show. So did we make it to 4 in a row, Jamie? What do you think?
I think we did.
Yeah.
To me, this one was sort of a pleasant surprise. Now, there are a couple of issues that I have that that when we start talking about it, I'll get into. But overall, I would count this on the positive side.
Yeah, I agree. It was like you said, a pleasant surprise. I think I was thinking about this when I was watching Scott Walker in this role because he did so well. Yeah, Paul. I keep calling him Scott Walker. Scott Walker is running for government or something, right? Is he trying to be a president? What is he? Did I just say a president too? Am I like a 16-year-old kid talking about
well, I guess
politics?
He would be a president
Yes.
in a line of many,
Isn't he like trying to be like a president or something? Like, I don't know what he's doing. This Scott Walker guy, he's like, I don't know. Did he get killed in a car accident and he still wants to be president? I don't really get that. So I keep calling him Scott. It's Paul Walker. So it was a pleasant surprise, I think. But I was thinking in my head, I was like, man, he's doing really good here. And there was a part of me that felt like, if this movie had been made in Japan, or had been made in Spain with like Javier Bardem or Gael Garcia Bernal or something like that, it probably would have been nominated for a Best Foreign Language Film Oscar. Just because of the basic nature. I think this kind of a film, because it's direct to video and it's Paul Walker, I think it gets discredited more than it should. And I think it's the kind of film that if it was a foreign film, or maybe had like an indie director attached to it or some indie name actors, it probably would have gotten more credit than it should have. I don't know if that sounds about right for this film.
No, I think you're right, but especially considering the subject matter. Whenever it's like those. It's like if you want your film to get an Oscar nod, there are subjects that you automatically go to, and the critics are going to look at those films, and like almost instantly, just based on what they're about, you're going to get some kind of arty credit for doing that. So if it involves anything with like a disabled person doing something well, like pilot's foot, or
Mm-hmm.
anything political or anything like a human interest story or something. Then and this was sort of like a tour de force.
Oh,
He spent the majority of the film with himself.
right, and it was very fascinating, right? He spends the majority of the film with himself and his two main co-stars, which this is like, isn't this like the classic rule for acting, right? You don't act with babies or children, and you don't act with dogs. And he broke both rules in this film.
He did. That dog's amazing. I love that dog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the dog was great. I mean, it did start off like you said. It started off kind of weird, like the interplay between him and the doctor when he finds out that his wife is dead was a little bit strange. I thought the story about how they met was a little bit outlandish. It was a little bit too uh, movie, I guess. I don't
Hmm.
know. It was a little bit too much about that they met. They both met like trying to stop a bank robbery um, as
Right, and
citizens.
yeah, he stopped the guy with the gun, and she maced the guy, got out of the car. Which that part actually made me laugh out loud when they're telling this, when there was the flashback of them telling the story at the dinner table, and
Hmm.
she's like, "I maced the guy," and he's like, "There was no mace involved." And
Right.
he's like, "There was no mace in it. It was hairspray." I don't know. There was something about that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was a very cinematic backstory. Because do you know anyone that you've ever met because you were both trying to stop a bank robbery simultaneously? It just is. It's a little too perfect. But they were a cute couple, so at the same time, I kind of I like that. I also was afraid in the beginning that it was going to that they were that it was purposely that way so that they could set him up as a hero, like someone that we could expect to be just like a really badass, just out of the gate because hey, he's done this in the past. So, but he really wasn't. He was just a regular guy. And so I was kind of afraid that they were gonna go down that hole and just go look what he did in the past, and now you can expect him to whip some ass, and he did okay, but it's not. I don't think he did anything superheroish, he just was a regular guy who was trying to keep his baby. And so I appreciated that.
Yeah, I agree. I think what was I going to say? I think yeah, it was like once his character got moving, once things got moving in the piece, I felt like there it was a little bit better. Um like then you got to really see Scott Walker. I mean, there were some scenes that he acted
Paul.
in. Oh, like okay, I did it again, didn't I? That'll be tonight's drinking game, right? Is to see if that would be the drinking game tonight. How many times is Matt going to say Scott Walker instead of Paul Walker? I've only heard that name Scott Walker a couple times, and I don't really know why suddenly he's become that. But there's that scene where he goes down to that makeshift morgue that they have in the
Oh wow,
and,
yeah.
and he's zipping up his wife into the body bag. It was just intense, that kind of finality, and I thought scenes like that he did really well with. And there were some other things. I think it kind of I thought the one scene that played out maybe the best, and then it kind of got weird, was the one where the guy came in with the gun to like take his food from him.
Hmm.
And I feel like that scene could have been a good end scene if the dog growls at him and he tells the dog to heel and the guy just walks out and leaves. I don't really know what happened with the whole, attacking the guy and then suddenly I guess the dog somehow escaped and left and the dog's the one that alerted them to him being there.
Yeah,
It was
I
very
see. I was
Lassie-ish.
afraid. I was afraid the dog was going to get killed the whole time, and that's what was bothering me. That's what was stuck in my head. And because when we first, before the guy gets there, the bad guy, we hear a gunshot down the hall, like just a pop of a gunshot, and the dog had just been running around playing, and I'm like, oh, damn it, he shot the dog, and it really upset me because you can take something all day long in a movie and it won't bother me, but if you kill an animal, especially when like that,
Oh, Jamie, I think we lost your mic there for a second.
oh no.
Oh, it went low. I think
Uh-oh.
it's coming in and out a little bit. I think
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I think it's like as you start talking, for some reason it starts to go.
Oh, my mic's telling me to shut up.
Is it? I don't know. It starts to go. I don't know. Now, I don't. I was trying to see if on my end if I could do something with it, but I'm not sure if. I think I tried messing with the levels on my end, but I'm not sure if it did it. We can always monitor it and see what happens. I know Brian's doing our tech support for us, and he noticed it as well. He said he was starting to hear a little. It's like you speak well and then you fade. I wonder because it seems like if I make a sound, something affects it. Maybe if I can play with your
Oh,
input.
good. We'll make it your fault.
Yes, I'll try to see if I can go like that while you're speaking. If that like brings it back in or something. I don't know enough about how these things work to know like what causes the problems or not. Um, but yeah, what was I about the the whole thing with the dog. I thought it was nice when he finds the dog and he kind of is like connecting with the dog. But I guess maybe we should bring up what the movie is about. I just realized that we kind of just like went hip deep in this thing, and
Oh, yeah.
and we
Okay.
did it. So long and short, Paul Walker brings his wife into the hospital right as Hurricane Katrina is bearing down on New Orleans, and his wife dies, but the baby is born, and the baby is about 5 weeks premature. So the baby is in what we'd say a respirator or incubator type machine, and Paul Walker has to sit with it.
Ventilator.
Ventilator. So 48 hours she needs to spend on the ventilator, and that's when all hell breaks loose. And everything that we saw on the news, the whole Brownie, you're doing a great job. That's the backdrop to Paul Walker for 48 hours having to try to, it goes from the generator doesn't work, so he has to use the hand crank generator, and which I thought was a very interesting plot device because it bordered on plot convenience theater, didn't it? The minute and a half or minute 50 that he would have.
It did, but I think it added an element of urgency to it because there were times where this film, particularly in the beginning, was going very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And you can expect that when you're basing an entire film around one character and they really have no one else to interact with.
Right.
It's if you don't have something to keep it moving, then it'll get stagnant. And that's kind of what I was afraid of in the beginning because, to be honest, when we first started out, and the doctor tells you that his wife is dead. I did not get that doctor's delivery of that information at all. It didn't make any sense to me the way he delivered it and the way he's just Paul Walker's reaction to that was not very convincing. His whole dramatic.
Oh, Jamie, I think we lost you again. That voice,
Son of a.
I don't know if maybe it's that different mic. I don't know if you want to try to use the one that you were talking about, maybe the head earbuds and the computer mic. I don't.
Yeah.
We can give that a try. And if you want, I can fill up the dead air. Jen just mentioned she thought I sounded low as well. Brian, I don't know what you were thinking. If you're having trouble hearing me too.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. You're faint. Let me see if I can turn you up on my end here. All right. Yeah, Jen just said she had the volume. Okay. All right. So let's see what I can do here for Jamie.
Action is just riddled with problems.
Okay, Brian, what do you got now for Jamie? Try speaking for us, Jamie. Let's see if.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Can you? Oh, he said nothing. Okay, I can hear you, but it is faint. It is a little faint. I turned you up all the way on my controls. Oop.
Can you hear me now?
Much better, much better. So let me turn you just a little bit down here, because I crammed you all the way up there. But
Okay.
There we go. That's much better. Okay, I think we're in business now. Yes.
Okay.
We got a yes.
Well, Brian, do I sound okay to you out there?
Yes.
All right.
Perfect.
Now this this is going to pick up every little thing probably because I'm not using a mic now. This is just the built-in mic for my laptop. So bear with me. Um, but what I was saying was, son of a.
Nope. We got you. We can hear you.
No, no.
Oh.
I'm just now. I just realized my battery's dying.
Oh no. Oh no.
I don't know what happened. It was fully charged. I need I need to send out an SOS for my charger, please. Um,
I'll be able to type in
and
the
in the
chat.
meantime, what was I saying? Oh, okay. It started a little bit slowly for me. I wasn't that sold on his reaction
Okay.
when he first found out about his wife.
Right.
It just seemed a little forced.
Mhm.
And then as stuff started happening, though, and he also didn't seem very connected to the baby at first, and I think that was
Right.
intentional, because the first thing he says to the baby is, "I don't know you."
Yes.
I mean, he's just found out that his wife died. He
Mhm.
has this brand new baby that he's going to be raising alone, and that's not ever anything that's going to be easy.
Right.
So he doesn't really have a connection with the baby at first. But then as he starts spending time with the baby and showing the baby pictures of its mom and telling the baby, how they met, and those are very sweet moments. And then stuff starts to happen. One of my favorite things about this film is how they would intersperse actual news segments
Mhm.
throughout the film to give you an idea of what was going on. Because, for instance, there's a scene where he goes to the rooftop to try to signal a helicopter that he hears, and he wants to signal this helicopter so that they can get him out, because pretty much this hospital has been evacuated, but he has to stay behind because the ventilator is not portable, and he really can't even leave it for long periods of time because the battery is old and it won't take a charge very long with the hand crank generator. So he's only getting about 2 minutes at a time. It starts out like 3 minutes and then it goes down to 2 minutes, and then so as the film goes on, there it gets a little more urgent. And he has a couple of minutes where he can roam anywhere away from it before he has to come back and crank it again to
Mhm.
keep his baby breathing. So that sort of gives you him having to stop what he's doing and run back and do that, and stop what he's doing and run back and do that. So he only has a little bit of time to do these things. So he takes one of those pockets of time, goes up to the roof in an attempt to signal a helicopter, and he does. I mean, he does have the attention of the helicopter, but then we see some people shooting at the helicopter from a building across the way. And then, of course, there's the news report that was sort of um, woven in there about how snipers were shooting at rescue helicopters. And I didn't know that. That is something that I had not heard about when it actually happened. I think, golly, I mean, people, damn it. I was so angry. And they're just like, no, you come over here. Like, you could hear the people yelling. They're shooting at the helicopter and then telling the helicopter to come over there first. Like, well, first of all, do you think if I was driving that helicopter, do you think if I were flying that helicopter that I would come over there at all after you just unloaded on me? I don't
Yeah.
think so,
No.
Um, but people, just lost their minds. But that was a really cool thing. Not cool as in good, but it was a really cool bit of information that I wasn't even aware of. And it adds a little bit of horror to the story. And then, of course, we have two different instances with looters.
Mhm.
One with a single man, and that's when the dog sort of saves the day. Um, and then another time where there are two guys coming in and they're looking for drugs, and so there are those little pockets of excitement. And then between those, we have Paul Walker talking to himself, talking to the baby, doing things to try to keep the baby alive while also trying to keep himself awake. I mean, if he falls asleep, he can't crank the generator.
Right.
And if he doesn't crank the generator, the ventilator will stop. So he can't sleep, he can't rest. He has to be ever vigilant. And it's what, 72 hours or so? How long is it? It's
48.
48 hours?
48.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
48 hours that he is stuck in this situation with very little food and no rest at all. It's kind of harrowing, and I have to say that by the time we got to the end of this film, I was emotional. I just when the dog comes back, that got me. And, it was just, you sort of had the feeling that he was going to make it, that the baby's going, otherwise that would just be a really shitty movie. It would just be, to go to spend 2 days with him in this hospital, running back and forth, cranking the generator, keeping the baby alive, only for it to not make it. That would just be shitty. So you kind of know something's going to happen. It's going to end okay. But you never really know exactly, because something easily could have happened to him and then the baby could have been saved. There's no guarantee that he would make it to the end. You kind of hope so because you've grown to care about this character. But, no one ever makes any promises. So by the time we got to the end, I was pretty emotional. And, of course, from Brian, he's like, well, that's no surprise. And it's not. I do get emotional when I'm watching movies, and I will admit that, or hell, when I'm watching America's Got Talent, I get emotional. But still, if we went through all of that and they were unable to elicit anything from me, then that would be a bad sign, So by the time we did get to the end, I was invested. I was invested in this baby. I was invested in him. I was invested in the dog, and I thought it was a nice little journey.
I completely agree. I confess I was a little emotional myself. There are a lot of very powerful scenes in the movie, and like we talked about that one where he has to, he finds his wife laying on the ground with a sheet over her because, again, they have, the hallway, essentially the hallway to the morgue is a makeshift morgue, and so he convinces this orderly to help him get his wife off the ground, and it shows him zipping her into a body bag, which is just a very powerful scene. And it's one that I think it doesn't take a lot for us to, to identify with a scene like that and go, wow, that's just that level of finality. And that's probably where it clicks, right, for him, that he now has the baby to focus on, right? That it's final about his wife. I think it never quite, it didn't sink in right away about his wife. Whereas, then when he has to actually do that. But also, I think, throughout the film, like you said, he's like putting her rings on top of the baby's the ventilator. He's talking about his father as well, who I guess had passed away. And so, like you said, it was very intense. And again, just the fact that I think that having to crank the generator, it did two things, right? It kind of created a sense of urgency, like, which, as you said, was lacking a little bit in the film early on. So it created that sense of urgency, but also I think it also got us invested. I think every crank of that generator got us invested all that much more because we saw the energy he's putting into trying to keep this battery alive. And so I think you're right. If we get to the end of all those cranks and there's no baby, we're not going to be very happy with the way this film ended. And I think the fact that we were, I guess, rewarded by having Paul Walker, I almost called him Scott there, if we were rewarded by Paul surviving as well, I think it's a good thing. But like you said, we didn't necessarily know that was going to happen.
Right. It's there are some things you can count on. Like, I really didn't see this film killing a baby,
right,
going in. So that didn't really surprise me. I don't think I'm spoiling anything by that either, because no one really would expect that.
Yeah.
But you never know how anything else is going to end up. And did you find yourself, while he was going back and forth, like, because he was running down to the generator room trying to see if the main generator could be saved, or because the hospital got flooded, he was going around trying to find food. He was trying to find adrenaline. He's out and about, but like we said, he only has a couple of minutes each time to do anything. Did you find yourself, like, listening for the beep?
Yes.
You're listening for the beep of the machine, or you're watching for his watch, because he would set the timer on his watch, and he would go, and there's a scene where he's down in the generator room, and he gets shocked and sort of momentarily knocked unconscious, and you can see his he falls back into the water, and you can see his watch start to beep, like,
yes,
the little blue light flashing on his watch as the alarm's going off. And I'm like, get up, get up, get up.
yes.
Wake up, the alarm's going off. So I got to the point where I was, if I heard the machine beep in the background, but he didn't seem to hear it, I'm like, that was the machine, go, go, go. It just, I was, I was in it with him. Like, I felt it with him. And I think he did a really good job of conveying, his exhaustion. There was a time when it'd been several hours and he was cranky, and I'm like, God, his arm has to be about to fall off
Mm-hmm.
right about now. And then a little bit after that, he's trying to fashion new ways to crank the machine. Like he tied his foot to the crank and started pedaling it, and then he got the the IV pole and
Yes.
started using that. And so I was feeling him there. Like I was like, oh, you must be exhausted. I know you must be exhausted. And I think he did a really good job of getting that across. And really, the only times I think that Paul's acting was a little bit hollow was like in the beginning when I said he was first delivered the news, and he was doing the whole, no, she's fine, Abigail's fine, let's go see her, she's fine. And I wasn't quite buying. I don't know, that whole scene, I just didn't quite feel it. But then later on, I felt like he got into it a little bit more. It reminded me when I was young, like say 20, I made a movie with some friends of mine, and we were just sort of messing around and made this movie called Suburban Nightmare, and I still have it somewhere. And there was a killer that got into the house, and we sort of did this. I had the bare bones of a script. Basically, it was an outline, and then everyone was pretty much ad-libbing
Mm-hmm.
what they were saying. And there was a scene where one of my actors was talking about, his wife went off because they'd come over for a dinner party, and his wife went to go to the bathroom, and she never came back. And he went to go look for her, and he found her dead on the bathroom floor. Now, I gave him that was his motivation. I was like, you just went to look for your wife. You found her dead on the bathroom floor. Now come back and react. Well, his reaction was ridiculous. I mean, it was just, he comes back and he's like, she's, 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 she's on the floor. We have to call the ambulance. And we're like, is she okay? He's like, yeah, oh yeah, she's okay. I think she just hit her head on the potty. And we're like, what? And she's clearly dead, like she's been stabbed. And he's like, no, she she's been developing diabetes, so I think she must have passed out and hit her head on the potty. And we're like, what? Now, oddly enough, I kept that in the
Did you?
movie. I don't know why, but I kept, because it was just so hilarious that I just let it go. But that's kind of what it reminded me of when I was watching this. And he's like, no, she's fine, Abigail's fine. And I was like, oh, Paul.
Yeah.
Paul. 'Cause I'm a huge Paul Walker fan. But I'll admit that there have been times when his dramatic acting is not completely there. And that made me afraid. But
Me
then
too.
as we got further into the film, and he got a little bit more comfortable with the situation, and other things started to happen, and I started to feel this emotional connection with him and the baby, then that eased a little bit. He seemed to embrace the role a little bit better, and that went away. Like, my trepidation went away. But in the very beginning, I was kind of unsure. I'm like, is he going to be able to carry this? Because clearly this is going to be an emotionally demanding film for him. Is he going to be able to do it? And I really think he did.
That you bring up a good point too, actually, that I didn't really even consider until we were talking about it now. But Paul Walker, I never really considered it with him. Because when I think of physical actors, I think more of like physical comedians, like a John Ritter or somebody like that, who could really sell the role physically. And I never really thought about it, but Paul Walker's kind of the same, only in a more dramatic sense or an action sense. That he also acts physically. He's a better physical actor than he is a dramatic actor.
Hmm.
And so when the film, after that scene happens with the doctor and it's done, the film starts to require more physicality from him. The crank, the running up and down the hall, the figuring out what's wrong, the trying to get the IV hooked up before it goes, running up the stairs. All of that stuff, I think, once he was able to immerse himself in that thing, I think the rest of the film fell into place for him acting wise.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because you're right. I mean, that's the sort of thing that he's used to. We're used to seeing him in stuff like, Fast and Furious, and um, well, I don't know. Pretty much everything he's done has been and sort of an actiony film in one way or another. Like, um, even Joyride,
Hmm.
which was one of the first things that I remember seeing him in, with Steve Zahn. I mean, it was a horror film, but it was very action oriented. Like, he was doing a lot of driving, and they were doing a lot of running, and there wasn't a whole lot of a lot of emotion required, or if there was, it was freak out emotion, action oriented emotion, the kind of stuff that we're used to from Fast and Furious and things like that. Whereas this film required a lot of like heartfelt, deep, I love this baby emotion.
Right.
And he definitely did end up doing a better job than I thought he would. Because I got to tell you, at first I was kind of nervous about that, because I just know that what I'm used to seeing Paul Walker in, and even though I love him in those roles, there's typically a reason that people do the kinds of roles that they do more often than not, and it's because that's what they're comfortable with. But I do think that when he started to have to get physical with it, then it worked out. And then that maybe the only shaky times would be when he was talking to himself while he was doing stuff. It always bothers me in movies when people do that a lot, because I'm thinking, I don't do that. Like, I don't just walk around the house and go, oh, let me put the laundry in, like, I need to separate the colors from the whites, and I need to gotta put the bleach in, and I just don't narrate everything I'm doing, so it seems unnatural to me whenever someone does that in a movie. But then at the same time, there's also people do that in films a lot to keep themselves sane, like if you're alone in a situation, then you talk to yourself to kind of keep from going crazy. And so that I can kind of see too. I don't know. It's just, it seems awkward sometimes.
Yeah, I know I do that. I've heard that men are more likely to do that than women. I'm not sure, but in my case, Jen will tell you that it's actually less so much that I'll talk to myself, but I often will, whatever song is in my head at the time, I may sing what I'm doing, and often it does involve some sort of conversation with the cats. So in that case, it's a little less so just me talking to myself and more to the cats. I usually have a running dialogue with the cats about what I'm doing in the morning. And so sometimes Jen will be like, if I have to get up really early, I have to be careful so I don't wake her up while I'm having my conversation with the cats in the morning. But yeah, so in that sense, I identified a little bit better when he was talking with his infant baby and with the dog, because that makes more sense. We all talk to animals, and babies too, as if they're there, that they can hear us, or anybody that we can talk to. But you're right. I think the running narration when they're doing something on their own, I think it makes more sense when he's doing things like he's yelling at something for not working, right? Because we all do that.
Right. Right.
But the running narration, it is. I think those were things about this film. There were those little things that this film would do that kind of made me go, okay, maybe, it's like those little things that made me go from going like, hey, this is the kind of film that the Oscars overlook, and because they're too busy looking at the one that's, got Bradley Cooper and whoever else, and Matthew McConaughey, and right, or just like the or Paul Walker. I did it again. I guess that's a drink, right? If I but it's like with Paul Walker, where there's that part of you that wants to say, oh man, just because he didn't lose a lot of weight means he didn't win an Oscar like Matthew McConaughey, right?
Right.
But then
or George Clooney.
Exactly.
You have to either gain weight or lose weight.
Right. Exactly. So see, you want to have that sort of that sense of like, these are the films the Oscars always overlook. But then there's so many other parts of the film, like Paul Walker in the early going, or those moments that were a little bit odd, that I think betrayed the film a little bit. I think there were certain scenes where I think this film did go, I don't know, it's a Lionsgate release, and there were moments that felt a little bit too Lionsgatey, if that makes sense. It felt like a little too much like a 50 Cent, or the rapper 50 Cent, or kind of Bruce Willis DTV actioner type deal. And that those moments betrayed the film. I thought the whole thing with the looters, it was interesting how that played out at the end. So how he dealt with the two looters. But he seemed to, it did kind of work though. It worked. I thought. I
liked it.
Yeah.
I liked that a lot. It just, I felt that he had reached pretty much a breaking point. Mm-hmm. And now it was all about survival of him and survival of his baby.
Right.
and there was just no time for hesitation. And I like that. I think that was a very realistic, like, way to portray that. Although I found myself throughout the film going, is he going to get in trouble for that? If he broke that window to get that helicopter, would he have to pay for that?
Yeah.
Is he gonna? I mean, these are the kind of things that go through my mind when I'm watching. Like, in a situation like this, they're gonna forgive him for punching that hole in the wall when he, out of frustration, or is he gonna have to pay for that?
Right.
I don't think he'll have to pay. He won't have to pay for that. Is he gonna get in trouble for killing that guy?
Right, right. Well, exactly. And it's interesting. I don't know if you ever saw the documentary that Spike Lee did 2 documentaries on Katrina. He did one, when the levees break or when the levees broke. That was kind of that was the big one. That was the initial aftermath. And then he did one 5 years later. That was God, if God's willing and the creek don't rise. But that first one, they were interviewing people about that, and there were interesting things that happened. Not interesting, but actually very bad things that happened. And one of them, that first looter kind of reminded me of, there were these sort of, racist mobs or small pockets of white supremacist type guys or, Southern racists who were going around killing African Americans. If they saw any African Americans around, they would kill them. And that character, that first looter that he encounters, that he thinks is an army officer, the bald guy with the
Right.
With the camouflage, it kind of smacked to me as one of those guys, so sort of like paramilitary types that was heavily armed, going around, assuming that there was a race war going on or something after the loot, the flooding, and it made me think because you notice that character. It wasn't so much the fact that Paul Walker had a baby. I mean, the baby was part of it, but he kind of instantly deduced that Paul Walker wasn't a threat, right? He just sort of had this natural feeling like Paul Walker wasn't a threat, and it was Paul Walker that had to figure out that this guy was a threat, that this guy was a looter, and the guy, he takes his candy bars but leaves his soda or something like that. But it kind of had me
I wanted to punch that guy in the face.
Yeah, he was bad, and I got the sense that he was kind of supposed to be one of those types of looters. That if Paul Walker had it been the doctor, for example, who was an African American, perhaps he would have been killed by that guy. And that would have been an interesting thing. But the problem is, it wouldn't have isolated Paul Walker if we had the doctor there the whole time, and then he gets killed by that guy. But I think maybe it was better to have the undertones anyway. And then we get the kids that are in there later who are there looking for drugs that they can sell or get high off of or whatever. And so there was a little bit more of a sinister bent to them because they're kids and you just don't know what they're going to do.
Right. One thing that I think is interesting is you have the two, when it comes to the kids, you have the one who was like raiding the drug closet, and then you have the other one who heard the baby.
Right.
And his reaction at first was one of like, hey, it's a baby. Like, it didn't seem sinister.
Right.
At all. It was incredulous, like, wow, there's a baby here. And he kind of had like a little bit of a gentleness about him when he was trying to get, I felt it anyway, and I don't know if it was supposed to be there or if that was, the actor's just, the guy, but I felt like, I don't think he would have done anything bad to the baby,
Right.
But when he then turned around and saw the aftermath of Paul's character running into his friend, and then then you sort of they had their little standoff there. Then you saw that was going to end badly, basically, at that point. But I thought it was kind of interesting that before he knew Paul Walker was even there, when all he saw was the baby, I would have been interested to see what his reaction was going to be. Would he have taken the baby to try to save it? Would he have left the baby? Would he have harmed the baby? I was really curious to see where his character would have gone with that. Only we didn't really get that, and then it sort of ended kind of abruptly, which I loved. I did really love that scene. I thought that was really the best way to do that, and it was really powerful. I'm trying to be careful not to spoil too much for people out there who want to watch it. Because I do think you should. I think you should give this a watch. It's interesting. It's There are a lot of things that are going to make you go, would that really happen, or what? I don't know. For the most part, I think it was pretty believable. I mean, the number one question would probably be, how would this guy be stuck in this hospital with no one else? But the doctor left. The doctor was supposed to come back, but the levees broke. The doctor couldn't get there. I mean, that is completely plausible.
Right.
A nurse left to go to try to get help. She did come back, but didn't do much good. That's completely plausible considering what was going on at the time. And we all know how the looters were out and how dangerous it was. And not even just for people out and about, but for people that were supposedly safe inside the dome. Mm-hmm. For people who had been rescued, it was not that much safer for them. So we know that during this whole situation, it was a very dangerous, sketchy time, and you didn't really know who you could trust, who was going to be helpful, or who was going to try to take advantage of you. So all of that stuff is very believable and very realistic, and it's kind of horrible. I was talking to Brian after this, and he didn't watch it really. He was kind of in and out, and he was doing other things. But I was like, when 9/11 happened, what we got there was, for the most part, the best parts of humanity came together, and you had people helping each other. Everyone was affected by it emotionally, whether you were close by or not. You were invested in that situation, and if you were close by, then you were either knew someone who had gotten killed, or you got killed, or you were helping people who knew people who were missing. I mean, it was a really horrible, difficult time for us as a country, but at the same time, it brought out some of the best parts of humanity within our countrymen, I think. And then you have the situation with Katrina, where it was just horror after horror after horror, and there were, of course, some good stories that came out of that, but really what you heard about the most were the horror stories. Mm-hmm. And it just blows my mind how you can have two equally destructive, horrible events take place and have such completely different reactions.
Yeah, and I think maybe because, I guess there's two things at play with 9/11, right? One was that it was an attack of some sort, and so there's a sense of, like,
that's true.
Nationally, there's that national pride of, like, hey, you can't attack us. Kind of the same as with Pearl Harbor. It was that happened. Back then it was the same idea. Like, hey, somebody attacked us. We need to get them back. You can't do that with a hurricane, right? The hurricane's already gone.
That's true.
You can't do anything. But then I think the other problem with it is that, the hurricane takes place over a wide area. Those levees affected such a huge area, whereas, the World Trade Center was in one central part, one centralized location, and so they knew where everybody where you needed to go to find people, and you needed to, whereas everybody was so far out, and so that's where I think you really, the lawlessness was because there was so much remoteness about it. People were just stranded. But there were so many other things about it too. I mean, we're learning now that there were things about 9/11 too that were mishandled. We're learning that the people that were down there, that we, remember how we were so we applauded so much the workers who went down there to clean things up, and now we're finding out that, well, they were subjected to a lot of toxins down there that they weren't told about. So we're kind of starting to get. I think kind of like once the rah-rah part of it went away, the sobering reality of it, I think, is kind of sitting of some of the things that weren't good. But I think there's that little bit of a difference there. But I do think the fact that, it was a natural disaster, I think on some levels, I don't want to say it created a sense of apathy among Americans. But, I think as Americans, we're always hearing about natural disasters all over the country, tornadoes hitting, things like that, and we think, oh, that's horrible, or yes, we got to send some relief. And I think it took a while for parts of the country to realize. And I think some people in the United States still don't quite know how bad Katrina was. They may have, either tuned out. I mean, obviously George W. Bush didn't know. I mean, we know he was kind of clueless anyway, but even he didn't really know. When he's doing the whole Brownie, you're doing a great job here thing. I mean, even he didn't quite get it. But I think there are people in the country that still, whereas 9/11, we know. We see the planes, we see it. But
That's true.
yeah, I think it's hard with Katrina to distinguish it from other natural disasters until you get in and start seeing some documentaries on it, and you start to really look at what happened.
I think the same thing is true of Sandy too. Sandy tore a huge destructive path, completely wiping out the whole of the Jersey Shore. I mean, it's just and so much damage was done to personal and public property in and around New York and all of it. I don't think people realize exactly how bad it was.
Yeah.
Even if you're told, like even if you hear the numbers, it's difficult to imagine exactly all the different individuals that it affected. And it's interesting. This is going to sound so dumb, but one of the things that drove home to me exactly how bad Sandy was this is so stupid, I'm going to admit it though, was watching People's Court.
Right.
Because a lot of damage ended up on that show, and
Right.
it was just for the longest time after that hurricane, people were coming in suing for various things, like his boat wasn't lashed properly, so it crushed my car. If he had lashed his boat properly, then my car would be okay, so I'm suing him for it, that kind of thing. But it was just case after case after case after case. Or it would be, this happened when we had no power, or, because of Sandy we didn't have and it was just, they were just pouring in, and I was realizing this is just a fraction of the people that it affected. And these are just the ones who were, going to litigation over things. There are millions of other people who were affected and you never hear about. So, and that seems kind of like a stupid little thing, but it was just one example. When I kept hearing it, it's like, oh, because of Sandy, oh, because of Sandy, oh, because of Sandy. And I'm like, wow. And I really don't feel like that hurricane got nearly the attention that say Katrina did. And I think Katrina was worse, but I think we all knew a little bit more about that one than we did about Sandy. And maybe it was, there was a lot of things going on natural disaster wise at that time, not just here, but all over the globe. And after a while, I think you're right. People just start to, it's like, oh, it's another one. Oh, it's another tsunami. Oh, it's another earthquake. Oh, it's another, and they kind of run together after a while. If you're not directly affected, then it may not seem all that real or all that bad.
Well, yeah, and
that makes any sense.
No, that's definitely true. And I think for Sandy, for example, like I where I lived in Maine at the time, before I was down here, we were like glanced by it. You know what I mean? Like just a little bit of it touched us. It wasn't anywhere near what it was in New Jersey. But when I came down here to live in Philadelphia, of course, all of the people here in Philadelphia in this area, the Delaware Valley region, they go to the shore. Talk about going down ashore. Get some hoagies and get on ashore for the weekend. And so that's the big thing to do. So you do see the commercials here quite a bit. Chris Christie, other people advertising. We still need support, or they have another one ad campaign right now telling people who do work on their homes to make sure that they're using the proper equipment, or they're safe when they're trying to save them, because that's the big thing is that a lot of people had summer homes down there that they just went down and found them completely destroyed, and so they're sort of rebuilding them as they go, because they're not their real home, right? It's their second home. So it's not as much of an impetus to do it, but then of course that stuff sits for a long time, and so it's more dangerous. So that's even part of it that I didn't even think about. I mean, it's been 3 years now, but there are people that are still rebuilding and fixing things after all this time after.
Oh yeah, and that's another thing that I started hearing about was were the properties that hadn't been dealt with so quickly, because like you said, they were second homes, or maybe rental properties even, that people just either didn't have the time or the money, or just weren't that much in a rush to deal with because it wasn't their primary home. Mold has taken up, and
Yeah.
and it's just the damage just as it sits, the damage just gets worse and worse and worse. And it's not just like the water sweeps in and the water goes away and then you just have to wait for stuff to dry out and everything will be fine. I think that's another thing is people don't necessarily realize is that there's a lot that goes along with it. It's not just a matter of something getting flooded and ruined from the water damage. It's it's poisonous.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it can be deadly just to be in the water. And they even one of the clips during the movie today you heard her, warning people, don't try to go anywhere. If you're in a safe place, stay in a safe place. Don't wade through the water.
Right.
And then of course that's the first thing you see whenever you see people on the news during a situation like this is you see people wading through the water trying to get places.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really, they think, oh, swollen river. I swim in the river. I swim in the lake. Why can't I just wade through this water? And there's so many other things that
Yes.
that go along with it. Plus, they were talking about poisonous snakes and all these other things. And it's just like God. I mean, it just had become a stew of death,
Yeah.
basically. And it's just. I think that, like I said, if you're not in it, if you don't personally experience it or know someone who has, then it may not hit home exactly all the bad things that are involved here. And it's not, like I said, just a matter of water coming in and ruining some stuff and then going away. It leaves behind it so much more destruction, so much more dangerous things because the water sweeping in is just the first of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you've got all the other much more dangerous things to deal with. One of those things being your fellow beings.
Right, which is, I really like that aspect of the film is that, where you on the one hand you want there to be people because it might mean you're going to be safe, but on the other hand you don't know if these people are safe. And what's interesting about Paul Walker's, as we're kind of wrapping up here, we are given the news reports, but Paul Walker is not getting these news reports. He has no idea what's going on out there.
Right.
Yeah, and so that was another interesting element of the film too, is that he doesn't really know until that first looter comes in there to even be worried about looters.
Yeah, I mean he hears another human being, he thinks rescue, he thinks safety, he thinks help. And it doesn't strike him until well into the conversation, really, that this is someone that is going to be a threat to him, that this is someone that could possibly end up killing him and his child. So which is just a sad thing, because we know, I mean, we knew it immediately. Like, I never trusted that guy from the first moment we saw him.
No.
And I'm like, no, don't trust him. Don't trust him. He's a bad guy. And I just wanted to slap him across the face because I knew he was evil. And then while he's taking his food, what little food he has,
right?
He's trying to take his food. I just was so angry.
Yeah.
And it was at that point that finally Paul Walker was like, hey, who are you with?
Yes.
Wait a minute. I thought you were a good guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had no idea that at that particular point, people were what you needed to be concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
Which really, in any like apocalyptic situation, that's the thing that terrifies me the most. Really is like if we were to have a zombie menace or some kind of viral outbreak or in anything that could lead to the end of the world, to me the most frightening thing are other people.
I think especially in the United States, unfortunately, because we have this idea. I mean, we all stay all locked up in our little houses with our guns and whatnot. That the moment the law is what actually keeps us from hurting each other, not guns or or anything
not
like
humanity,
that. Not humanity. No, America, I think, would be the scariest place to endure a zombie apocalypse, which is kind of evidenced by The Walking Dead. You get a good sense of what a zombie apocalypse would be like in the United States. It's not a fun time. You got to find your best sheriff and stick by him the whole time and hope he pans out to be a nice guy, because if you get the bad guy sheriff, you're in trouble.
Or did you ever see The Road?
No, I've never seen that one. I remember that one. Yeah,
man.
I meant to see that.
Depressing, but it's just people. That's what you have to be worried about, and yeah, I really do think that this country in particular would be really frightening because everyone is really concerned about themselves and their own.
Mm-hmm.
And in a situation like that, it makes sense, but not to the point where you're harming other people.
Right.
But it always makes me think of that episode of The Twilight Zone from years back where the one guy had the bomb shelter and everyone always made fun of him because he built the bomb shelter, and they're like, oh, you're so paranoid, you've
Yeah.
got the bomb shelter. But then when the plane crashed and they thought it was a bomb,
Right.
everyone is trying to get into his bomb shelter to the point where they are destroying the shelter itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you won't save me, then you won't be saved either.
Right.
You know, and that's just how I picture, just climbing over each other. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and we see it whenever there's any kind of situation like a fire in a building. People will trample each other to get
Yes.
out. And on one hand, you think, I get it's human nature, it's survival, but then you're like, I don't want to be that way.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. So it's
You know.
yeah. Well, maybe that's a good place to leave it here on this one, because what's good about this film is that you get kind of a nice little nugget at the end with Paul Walker and his daughter, his infant daughter. But I think overall, I think our streak continues here. For me, I would say for a lot of our listeners here, this movie is not the kind of film that we usually watch. I mean, it is very intense. It's also very dramatic. It's not your fun like popcorn movie that you probably want to get the buddies together for, get all your friends together and
no.
watch. It's not one of those. But I think if you're really kind of curious to see what Scott Walker can do in a different role, or Paul Walker, I did it again. Drink, everybody, drink. But I think if you're curious to see what Paul Walker can do in a different role, I think it's worth it. Especially with Netflix, you don't have anything to lose except for the hour and a half.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was worth it. It was worth my time.
Yeah, me too, definitely. So that's it, 4 in a row. We'll see what happens next week. But before we wrap up here, let's look at what we've been up to lately. Again, for me, it's a whole lot of nothing, though I was close to getting ready to type up that that legendary one. So hopefully pretty soon I will. I will say I have noticed the Facebook, we have gotten a good amount of likes. We're over the 500 mark, which is great. I got to say, Jamie, it's a big part with you doing the podcast with me. I think the two of us has been great. But ever since we've been doing the podcast together, the number of likes has surged on the Facebook there, and I just called it the Facebook. But so I apologize for that on Facebook. But so I thank you for that, Jamie. It's been about a year since we've been doing the show together, so it's been great to do this with you. I've had a lot of fun, and I think we're just going to keep. I think it's just going to keep growing. Or keep building on this from here. It seems like with the amount of people liking it. I want to say to people who have sent messages, I'll try to get them as soon as I can. I apologize, but thank you all for supporting the show and being on.
Yeah, I second that. I really appreciate any time we get any kind of feedback or people let me know that they're out there, they're listening. I appreciate that you want to spend time with us.
Yeah, definitely. So now again, because I'm not up to anything, Jamie, how about you? How are you going in the other podcasts?
I really haven't been doing a whole lot. We've got Evil episodes as usual. That keeps trucking along. But my other podcasts have been sort of on hiatus, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Not whether it's been intentional or not. I really haven't been all that podcast busy lately. So not a whole lot to report.
Yeah, this is kind of hiatus time of year, isn't it?
I guess so. I mean, it's summer.
Yeah.
People's got stuff to do.
Yeah, people get all hiatusy and things like that. Hiatus. Hiatus, is that what we want to say?
Sure.
Yeah.
You can make that up.
We
if you
could
want
say
to.
hiatus. Well, hey, that's good. So that this is the first week in a while that you've been sort of in a similar boat to me. Now, of course, this is 1 week out of how many since I haven't been doing the blog since February. So 1 week and 5 months that you and I have been in the same boat. So not bad, right? Not bad. All right. Well, I did get onto Facebook, though. If you're listening to this one, if you're someone who, I did get onto Facebook and get the other two films, the two pods we just recently did, into the archives over the weekend. So we're a little bit, we're up to date there. Hopefully I can get this one up tonight. But, of course, if you're listening to it on the podcast, you've already downloaded it. But hopefully, again, if you're listening to this one and and I did get it up on time, but next week or the week after you don't quite find the episode right away, always check the RSS feed on my Matt Movie Guy page. That's a good way to get the most recent one. I try to get it up at least the night after. I know with Brian last week, he wanted to listen to ours, and I didn't quite get it up on time because I actually left it running. I was like over talking to Jen in the living room, realized I hadn't stopped the podcast, so we were on the air for like 10 minutes after. I had to trim it down. So if there's no trimming, then we're all set. So I'll try to get it up by the end of the night, and so you'll have them right away.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you all again for listening. Thank you for the likes on Facebook and all the support. We all appreciate it. And we'll see you next week to see if we can make it 5 in a row.
Yeah, that would be astounding.
I know. We may never come close to this again, but I'm hoping we can keep the train running. So we'll see you all next week and see if we can make it 5.
Yep. See you later.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.